Ethan, we want to have a reaction initially to these numbers that just came out. Empire Manufacturing numbers, a big miss. It was expected to be 15, it was 5.2. Is this part of a pattern now of soft numbers coming in? We had the numbers, the CPI numbers, as well as the retail numbers on Friday. We had jobs numbers a couple weeks ago that were bad. Is this sort of a pattern?
I think it is a pattern. I think the data in the U.S. has been on the disappointing side for the last couple months. It's actually quite notable. I mean, if you look globally outside the U.S., the data actually continues to be pretty healthy. We've seen much weaker numbers. Probably part of the story today with this report is, remember, these things are partly a measure of business confidence. It's not just them telling us what their activity is, it's telling them how they feel about the economy. And my assumption here would be that they've looked at the problems in getting tax reform through. They look at the delays in even talking about infrastructure spending. And so there's a little pulling back going on in business confidence. They have kind of a prove it to me attitude. We need to actually see some policy changes, and then we'll become a bit more optimistic again.
Well, Ethan, if that's right, that's a pretty substantial shift, because the soft data has been so bullish since Donald Trump was elected president. If we in fact are starting to see the soft number come down to the hard data, that could really spell some troubles for investors, for markets, for businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I expect some of that to happen. I think that as we came into the new year, the soft data was very bulled up, a lot of hopes for big policy changes. And now the markets have already to some degree adjusted to some disappointment, and so now I think we'll see some of that in the surveys. This isn't a disaster. I mean, this is still an okay number and the economy's still healthy, but some of that exuberance is coming out of the soft numbers, I think, going forward.
And coming out of expectations for the Fed as well. How much ammunition does data like this, as well as the core CPI miss on Friday and retail sales, give to the doves on the FOMC when the market now is only looking at one hike next year and just one more hike this year?
Yeah, I think the data flow is definitely favoring the doves. I mean, we've been arguing that they'll probably skip the June meeting, although it's always been a close call. And, you know, if this data flow continues, I don't think they hike at the June meeting.
And what's the shakeout then for markets? Because markets have been, in essence, sort of pricing in that reflation. How much more can be drained out when you have the 10-year just at 2.23%?
Well, I think the 10-year has actually been reacting kind of as expected. I mean, the markets got very bulled up about a big tax reform and infrastructure spending, and I think the bond market in many ways has appropriately downpriced that. I think the risk is more to the equity market, which is a little bit behind bonds in recognizing that maybe the big boom in the economy isn't coming. So I think bonds are reasonably priced right now, but I think there's some risk to the equity market.
What do you think it's realistic to expect, Ethan, on tax reform at this point, given what you have seen? We saw President Trump most recently said, you know, we may have to do the health care again before we get to tax reform.
Yeah. I think that we need to recognize that the agenda before Congress right now is massive. These are very complex legislation. The tax reform bill they've put forward is very complicated, has a lot of new bells and whistles, and healthcare reform is always tough to do. It took Obama 13 months to get his health care plan through. So I think that what I'm looking for is, at what point do the leaders in Congress start to kind of scale back these bills and try to be a lot less ambitious in what they're trying to do? So on tax reform, if you go back a year ago, people weren't talking about comprehensive tax reform, they were talking about international corporate tax reform. That is, fixing this problem where we discourage companies from locating in the US, where we have much higher corporate rates than other countries. That should be the focus. That's where the biggest problem in the tax system is right now. If they can pivot to that and kind of simplify the bill, then I could see some significant progress in tax reform. If they continue to push for border adjustment and things like that, then it becomes a very difficult road ahead.